Hello everybody, you're on the Working Families webinar. I'm just watching the number of our participants creep up, and once it's got to probably around 75% of the people that we think are going to be joining us today, I'm going to be starting. So on your screen, I hope you'll be able to see our panelists. We're very excited to welcome them today to this webinar. It's a fantastic way to kick off National Work-Life Week. And we're really grateful for them for taking the time. And also just to let everybody know that we will be recording this. So I'm just looking at the number of participants creeping its way up. And then I think probably it is now 11:02, according to the various devices I have around me. So I think we'll start off. So hello everybody, my name is Jane Fonsale and I'm the Chief Exec here at Working Families, and I feel very lucky to have my job. I've got a wonderful team around me. Working Families is, as many of you will know, we are the UK's work-life balance charity, and our mission is to remove the barriers that people with caring responsibilities face in the workplace. We work closely with employers, and we have 3 of our employer members here with us today. We support them to create flexible, high-performing workplaces. This week, we're celebrating National Work-Life Week, as I mentioned, which is our annual campaign to get both employers and employees talking about well-being at work and work-life fit. National Work-Life Week for us is more important than ever this year because, as we all know and are suffering from, the world of work has been transformed in the last 7 months. Employers particularly have realised that many more jobs than previously they thought can be done on a flexible basis. We'd love for you to join the conversation and we'd love for you to tweet about this webinar. If you do, please use the hashtag #WorkLifeWeek and tag us, and our Twitter handle is @WorkingFamUK. As I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared on social media. And in this particular webinar, we are showcasing employers who are leading the way in creating employee-friendly, flexible workplaces. We're going to hear from one of our best practice employers about providing greater equality. We're also going to be hearing from somebody with fabulously forward-thinking paid parental leave policies. And we're also going to be hearing from a top 10 employer. We're looking at paid leave, enabling flexible working for all employees, and innovative solutions to the challenges brought on by COVID-19. Our speakers today, and I'm mentioning them in the order that we've agreed they're going to speak, are Laura Rosario, who's the HR business partner at Dickinson, and they were a 2020 award winner. Then we've got Suzanne Christopher, who's the Senior Employee Engagement Manager from Imperial College, which is one of our top 10 employers. And we've also got Laura-Louise Fairley, who is the Senior Manager for Accountability with Save the Children. And they have really forward-thinking parental policies. So firstly, I'm going to ask Laura Rosario to start and tell us a bit about what Dickinson is doing. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for that. So as Jane said, I'm going to be talking about our embedded flexible working culture at Dickinson. So why was it so important to us to have this embedded culture? Well, a couple of years ago, we set a very simple strategy for the firm, which was grow our people, grow our clients. So that sort of underpinned our ethos that our people are key to our success and to our growth, and we really need to understand what is important to them and how we can support them. So as part of developing our people strategy, we held workshops with people across the firm in all different teams at all different levels to understand what was important to them. And really interestingly, across the board, people said flexibility and work-life balance, and that was in the context of parents and carers, but it was also in the context of people's mental health. It was in the context of people of different religions who may need flexibility at different times of year, and in the context of people studying, maybe studying and working at the same time. So for all different reasons, flexibility and work-life balance were really important to our people, and we realised it was something that we really needed to focus on. So what do we do? First of all, we provide everybody with a laptop on day one. So you have an induction with us, you're given a laptop, and you're given instructions on how to connect remotely. So from day one, it's clear that it's accepted to work from home, it's accepted to work from a different office, you can work on the train if you need to. However you want to work, that's okay, and you're in control. We use the Working Families tagline on our job descriptions, happy to talk flexible working options, so people know when they're applying to us that we're open to having that conversation. We've developed a smart working policy, which is our flexible, agile and home working policy, and that's open to all employees from day one. You don't have to have a minimum length of service to have access to that policy. And linked to that, we have quite a comprehensive Parenting Matters programme. So that's designed to support anyone who's going to be going on a period of family leave. So we have meetings with the individual and their manager before they go off, while they're off, and as they're returning to work. And at each stage of that, we discuss the smart working policy with them. So we hand them the policy, we get them to have a look through it, have a think about how it might apply to them. We talk to them about how other people have used it before, so that they can see all the different options that are available to them. And we work with managers, so if managers are struggling to see how a flexible working request could work for their team, we try and work with them to come up with a solution that works for everyone. And it's very rare that I've seen a flexible working request rejected when someone is returning from family leave, which I do think sets us apart from other employers. We train our line managers. So we have a management development programme that we put all our managers through, and anyone who we anticipate may have management responsibility in the future. And that talks about appraisals, regular feedback, checking in with your team, understanding the needs of your team, and the importance of flexibility and the give and take in the employer-employee relationships. That's sort of drilled into all of our managers. And we actually managed to make that virtual during the COVID crisis. We very quickly switched it to a virtual programme, which has been very successful and kept momentum going. We introduced Teams at the beginning of lockdown, Microsoft Teams, to help keep us all connected, and that's made the transition to everyone working from home run very smoothly. And we did anticipate that people would struggle during the lockdown, so we made it very clear from the start that we could be as flexible as possible. You know, we're aware that you have children at home, that you may have parents that you need to care for. Please don't worry, just talk to us about, you know, what you're worrying about, and we can try and come up with a solution. So we made it clear from the start that we were going to be very flexible with people, and we tried to create this sort of sense of community, and we had videos from our CEO and encouraged team get-togethers and things like that. So we've tried to create that sense of community during lockdown. So what's the impact been? We tried to ask for feedback on a regular basis to understand what the impact is, and it has been very, very positive. So in a survey at the beginning of this year, 79% of people agreed with the statement, "Working practices in my team support a healthy work-life balance." When asked what do people feel proud about working at Hill Dickinson, we received responses such as, "I feel privileged to have such a supportive employer in relation to parenting and flexible working." We have an excellent retention rate, so employee turnover is below industry average, and I do think that is linked to our work-life balance and the flexible culture at Hill Dickinson. Our net promoter score in engagement survey at the beginning of this year, so that's a score that measures engagement, was 34, which is a score of good, very good to excellent, and that is linked to our productivity as well, which is excellent. And we ran a recent pulse survey to check how people were doing during the crisis, and 84% of people said they felt well supported or extremely well supported during the last few months living in lockdown. So I think that just goes to show how our flexible working culture really did set us up to be able to transition to everybody working from home during these past few months that we've been living through. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of flexibility at Dickinson. I could probably say a lot more, but I'm conscious of time. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. That was really interesting. There were a couple of things that I picked up on really, was the day one option to have flexible working, which I think is extraordinary. The impact on diversity, which is really interesting, and mental health, of course, which I think pretty much most of us have perhaps not struggled with, some of us have struggled with, but I mean, it's certainly been top of mind, I think, for most of us over the last few months. And then your line manager training, which is just lovely. I do think line managers are given quite a rough time sometimes. They're expected to deliver, and yet they're not given the training to support their teams. So brilliant to hear everything that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to Suzanne Christopher and ask Suzanne to join us. So Suzanne's just unmuting and making her video available. Welcome, Suzanne. Thank you so much for being here today. And please tell us more about what you're doing at Imperial College.
Thank you, Jane, and good morning, everyone. As Jane said, my name is Suzanne Christopher. I'm Senior Employee Engagement Manager at Imperial College London, and we were delighted and very proud to be a top 10 employer for working families this year, after 4 years of being in the top 30, and receiving this recognition of all the support we've put in place, not only over the last few years, but the additional efforts we've made over the last 7 months to support all of our staff working remotely, but in particular parents and carers. So just Jeremy's put in the chat there, just to give you a bit of context about Imperial College. We are a Russell Group university. We're in the top 3 universities in the UK. And we are a STEM university, which means we have a specialism for science, technology, engineering and mathematics. The Imperial brand is very strong across the world, particularly now with our academics working on groundbreaking research into COVID-19 and the vaccine, and also offering scientific advice on the government SAGE group. In fact, I just had a live BBC update, and there's things going to be announced today, and I'm sure very proud that our academics are advising the government. So we have approximately 8,600 staff, which may surprise some people, and almost 2,000 of those were identified as key workers during the pandemic, and they were on campus supporting overseas students who had to stay in the UK for various reasons. We also had staff working on the NHS frontline in hospitals. We had to keep the research labs open and working, and we had security staff on campus keeping the facilities open and secure for those staff that did come into work. So we had obviously a very busy time during lockdown. The main difference to the private sector is that we're not measured in terms of profit or loss, but on student satisfaction and the number of students finding work after education, as well as a number of other external benchmarks such as Athena Swan and Stonewall, to really name but a few. So I wanted to specifically focus on how do we get senior buy-in to flexible working, and why is support for parents and carers so high on our agenda. Basically, we need to attract, recruit and retain world-leading academics and researchers to work in central London. We know the costs of commuting and living are much higher in central London. So what makes them want to do this rather than working and living, for example, in sort of leafy Oxfordshire, where they could work at different universities across the UK. So in order to attract those staff, we need to make sure that our package of benefits and engagement is attractive, and we very much see support for flexible working parents and carers as key to this. One of our main measures in terms of staff engagement is our biannual staff survey. Our response rate for the last one was 57% of staff, previous to that 63%. And our overall engagement score was 74%, which when we benchmarked this against others was very positive. In the staff survey, we included a comprehensive list of flexible working questions so that we would have a measure of the impact and the number of staff that are working flexibly, as there's lots of informal arrangements in place that we don't always know about in HR. So prior to COVID, the transformation of many departments, including HR, finance, ICT, had already led to smarter working and resulted in a reduced need for desk space to save costs and therefore a drive towards working more flexibly. I just wanted to talk also a little bit about Athena Swan. This is one of our main drivers again around flexible working and support for carers and parents. Overall, the college has a silver award for Athena Swan, but the Department of Chemistry has achieved gold statement. And for those of you that don't work with Athena Swan, it's an award which recognises commitment to advancing and specifically promoting women's careers in science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine. So this is really key for us. We have a dedicated Athena Swan committee, and their main purpose is to ensure that changes are made to departmental practices and culture so that departments can gain and retain their Athena Swan awards, and trying to move up the various levels where possible. So this platform actually provides us with a forum for discussion on all issues around gender, Athena Swan related topics, best practice at Imperial, and feedback on their applications. And this is all reported through to our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Committee. So we really are pulling forward these issues and making them key on our agenda in terms of creating a working environment for everyone to thrive. Similar to the previous speaker, we've actually undertaken 2 wellbeing surveys in the last 6 months as our way of checking in with all of our staff to see how they're coping, what their wellbeing's like, and do they have all the equipment that they need to work remotely. We are also undertaking a workload project. Workload levels have significantly increased over the last 6 months with the pressure of COVID and that always on response. So we've got a very high level sort of committee looking into this. And we're also looking at how to embed all the good flexible working that's been happening over this period, and to really learn from the lessons that we've seen and the good practice. We weren't essentially set up for everyone to be home working, but that was something that happened within the course of a few days. So we were really proud we achieved that, and we had the technology to support it, but we really want to learn from those lessons and take that forward. So I think in summary, flexible working makes good business sense in order for us to attract, recruit and retain the excellent staff and the world-leading academics that we need at Imperial College in London. So thank you. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you so much. I'm just struggling to start my video. There we go. Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was really fascinating. The workload issue, the always-on culture, it's something that Working Families picked up in our Modern Families Index, which we did in 2020. And everybody that or a lot of people that I speak to say that it really is an issue. And it's one of the things that really good quality employers are really trying to sort out. And I guess for Imperial, with your key workers, that must be particularly difficult because it's kind of pushing them not to carry on working when they might otherwise do. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Suzanne, and we'll be back with questions later on. So thanks very much. The next person that I'm going to introduce you to is Laura-Louise Fairley. Laura-Louise is from Save the Children, and she is going to be talking to us today about what's happening at Save the Children. Welcome, Laura-Louise. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Jane, and thanks to the other panelists today. It's been really interesting listening to your experiences too. So my name's Laura-Louise. I'm from Save the Children, working as a senior accountability manager, but I'm really here talking on behalf of staff and the staff networks that we have at Save the Children, we led a sort of initiative to increase parental leave at Save the Children last year. So I'm not from the HR department, so I can speak more about our experience of how we launched the policy and got buy-in, and then the impact that it's had. So a very brief introduction to Save the Children UK. We have around 1,000 staff with a UK branch of a global movement. We have around 800 staff in our London headquarters, and then the remaining are in regional offices around the UK, overseas, in retail, and then before COVID, a few were home-based. Obviously at the moment, the vast majority of us are working from home. We focus on helping children survive, learn, and be protected around the world. We look at health, nutrition, early learning, and humanitarian response. And we also support some of the most deprived and marginalised children in the UK, and have been taking quite a leading role in supporting children out of school during COVID lockdown. So what happened at Save the Children? In early 2019, off the back of a recently launched parents network that a few of us set up that quite quickly grew to around 100 members, one of our members, father, came up to us and explained that he'd been campaigning internally for an extension to the parental leave policy that we have at Save the Children, and was actually pitching and hoping for an equal parental leave. So for fathers or non-birthing mothers, for them to receive at least, or not at least, but the same amount of parental leave as mums, or at least an improvement from the current 2-week statutory leave. So I think he'd been talking about this internally for some time, but on his own had found that there wasn't a huge amount of momentum behind it. So the Parents Network and myself, we supported him to develop a proposal, and then in early 2019 we took it to our CEO and our ED for HR in one of our quarterly meetings that we have between the Staff Equalities Networks and the CEO and senior leadership. And immediately the CEO responded and guaranteed that he would look into this with HR and have a response back to us very quickly. So that was really thrilling. The leadership team at Save the Children has been making a really concerted effort, particularly over the last few years, to engage very closely with staff and staff networks so that they can help inform the diversity and inclusion strategies. And generally, anytime there's any kind of concern from any one of the staff equalities networks or proposal for some positive improvements, the leadership team takes it very seriously, which is great and not something that I've experienced in previous roles. So then HR went away and developed the policy itself in close consultation with the staff network, but other end users outside of the staff network as well, and also trade union representatives. It took some time to develop, around 3 or 4 months, because there was quite a lot of costing exercises that went into it, and it wasn't just as straightforward as adapting the old policy that we had. But in the end, in June 2019, Save the Children launched an amendment to its existing paternity and adoption leave policy, and extended it from the statutory 2 weeks at full pay to provide an additional 10 weeks at full pay, that I don't like the term, but the second parent, which could be the father or the adoptive parent, or in a same-sex relationship, the mother that's not the primary child carer, can take this 10 weeks of full pay at any point during the first year of the child's life. The only condition was that they have a similar service time to in our maternity leave policy, and also that 10 weeks has to be taken in one chunk. It can't be divvied up across the year. And it can be anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks, it's up to the individual. So that was launched, and we are a predominantly female organisation, I think around 70%. So we didn't have a huge amount of uptake, but around 5 or 6 fathers did immediately apply for that leave and have reported back that they had the most fantastic time supporting their children. Really importantly for me actually, and my experience, was that they were there to support their partners as well. I raised my daughter quite alone, as her father had to work late nights, and for me it was very difficult. So I think this was part of my drive to support this campaign. It's not just for the benefit of those who are taking the leave, but really importantly their partners who are otherwise alone at home with a really young baby, and we're all well aware of the well-being aspects that surround that. So as well as it benefiting the individuals, it has a benefit to the organisation. People report back that they feel incredibly grateful to work for Save the Children, and they feel valued. And it's just another example of how our leadership team are demonstrating listening to staff and the issues that matter most. Obviously, as an organisation focused on the rights of children, it was also just the right thing to do. Our CEO explained at the time that increasing the leave available for parents is good for their health, for their child development, and for gender equality. We fight for that in the work around the world, and this policy puts our commitment to children and their families at the heart of our culture. It's critically about practicing what we preach. Then I think what I'd say is anyone who's interested in looking at something like this, my 2 tips on the back of what we've done is really allowing the period of leave, the additional 10 weeks, to be taken at any point during that first year and not just pushing them on the back of the first 2 weeks of statutory leave. This is really important because a lot of fathers reported back that it was there were different periods of time within that first year that it was most valuable for them to be there. Perhaps one of the child's grandparents might have been available in that early month or 2, and then there was periods later on where the father could step in, perhaps when it was getting particularly tiring for their partner. And also just really carefully consider who it's going to be eligible for. So for example, if you were to roll it out in October, is it for those who have children after that date, or can it cover everybody at that time who has a child under the age of 12 months? These are sort of some sticky areas that are really important to consider during that process. But yeah, it was just the beginning of a really fantastic couple of years working with the leadership team. We're now, myself and a colleague are leading a national campaign for the Equalities Act to recognise single parents in their protected characteristics. And we're specifically working internally at Save the Children with how Save the Children can incorporate the needs of single parents like myself, who are a really vulnerable group, into their diversity and inclusion strategy, but also recognised within their policies. So it's just, it's a great time to be working at Save the Children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura-Louise. That was absolutely fascinating. What I always find wonderful about conversations about parental leave, which fathers are taking up, is that in the 1970s, on average, men were spending 15 minutes a day with their children, which is fairly appalling. I mean, obviously it's an average, so you know there are some great fathers out there. There were some great fathers out there in the 1970s, but clearly the world is changing, and definitely for the good. So thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to quickly go back to Laura Rosario, and just to ask her to tell us a little bit more about Hill Dickinson in the context of Jeremy's question to everyone. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, sure. So Hill Dickinson is an international commercial law firm. We have offices across the UK and also internationally. So we have about 850 employees altogether around the world. Our head office is in Liverpool. That's where we're headquartered. And yes, we're basically a commercial law firm, all different aspects of the law. So majority of our employees are solicitors.
Thanks very much indeed, Laura. So what I'm now going to do is pose 3 questions to the team. If you do, to the panelists, who probably are a team by now. And if you have any questions, all of you on our webinar, if you'd like to put that in the chat, we'll get to them. There's certainly already a question about the take-up of SPL. But firstly, I'm going to start with the first question, and I'm going to ask the panelists to let me know which one of you wants to jump in first. So commentators fear that women will be shown to have been more impacted by juggling work and caring during the pandemic than men. What do you think employers could do in mitigation?
I can jump in here if that's okay. I actually, from our experience, we've found that it's been a real mix. So women have struggled. Having your children at home and trying to do your job is basically impossible. So we have had that, people have struggled. But we've also found that men have really struggled during the lockdown, and in terms of their mental health, it's really impacted the sort of loss of routine has been something that people have really struggled with. So we sort of anticipated at the start of this that people were going to find this difficult, and we've really tried to, as I've said before, keep up this sense of community. So we've really encouraged people to have team get-togethers, like quizzes and things. In our internal communications, we've had videos from our CEO talking about his experiences and asking everyone to stay safe, and we've had various competitions and things going on, just to sort of try and help with the isolation. And we've advised people about various apps that they can go on, like mindfulness and resilience and yoga apps and all that kind of things like that people can do to sort of help with how they're feeling at the minute. Currently we've got our COO is conducting lunch and learn sessions about living in lockdown, and that's all about getting away from your desk, setting your hours. So if you say you're going to finish at 5 o'clock, don't carry on working until 7. You don't need to do that. Go out for a walk at lunchtime, and just sort of setting yourself some rules around working from home, because it is so easy just to get carried away and just carry on because you're here and you're at your desk at home. So that's sort of what we've tried to do, but we have found that it's been a real mix. We actually have a sort of a watch list in the HR team as well of anyone that we've heard about who may be struggling. We'll give them a call just for a chat, and people have really appreciated that, just that sort of human personal interaction, because everyone's experiences have been different.
Thanks, Laura. And Laura, in terms of, I'll come back to you actually in a bit. Let me put that question again to Suzanne. So Suzanne, what do you think employers could do in mitigation in terms of the fear that the pandemic will have affected women more than men?
We've done a lot of a different sort of approach it from a lot of different angles, a lot of well-being tools and support online. One of the other things we've really tried to do a lot more of are our parents and carers networks. So we've kept those going over Teams meetings during this time, and that's been another really good check-in point as to how parents and carers are coping. Also, parents and carers could access the furlough scheme on request. So if they were really struggling, they could nominate, volunteer to go on furlough on full pay. We topped up pay to 100% for those staff. So that gave them the opportunity to spend more time at home for caring purposes. We've also introduced a new email signature because we recognise that some parents were obviously taking time out during the day to care for children or other adults, and then working in the evenings or very early mornings. So we've introduced an email strapline along the lines of, I'm not working regular hours as this suits me, along those lines, but you don't have to respond during these hours equally. So yes, we've done quite a few different sort of approaches to cope with this.
Thank you. Laura-Louise, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a great question, and I think that the data is there really to support that. I think that to suggest an increase in flexible working and the ability to work part-time for those who can afford it is really critical, whether that's for the mother or the father. And then reasonable special leave policies that save the children. Immediately when lockdown kicked in, we increased, I think our special leave policy was around 10 days. And we immediately consulted with that in the leadership team. And I think we ramped it up quite soon after to about 30 days for the year. And then that cancelled and restarted itself in October, so that even if you'd used all that special leave, it could kick back in again. And the great thing about that was it meant that, mothers without stigma could take time off to be with their children when schools had closed. But equally, many fathers were using the special leave policy as well to be there for their children, so that their wives or partners could continue working. The other we also had the voluntary furlough scheme. So although it wasn't required necessarily from a financial perspective, anybody who was really struggling could put their name forward, and many of us were put on furlough so that we could look after our children. I think also really ensuring that there's no stigma surrounding taking that furlough or that special leave is critical. There's many mothers that felt that in the past they've been stigmatized for taking that, whereas at Save the Children we've really tried to quash that, particularly by senior staff leading by example on those areas. Other helpful areas could be ensuring meetings are just before between 10 and 4 o'clock, so that those who have to do the school run in the morning or pick up in the evening can get out of the house and not be judged by that. Finally, recognising the single parent issue as well, because I think, you know, the impact on women is huge. The impact on women who don't have a partner at home is monumental, and the vast majority of single parents are women. So that financial impact, the workload impact is just, you know, it's almost triple what it can be when you've got someone to support you. And if that's not part of your considerations, there's a small group that can really be missed out there. But all of this, despite the impact on women, I think it's really important that men and fathers and those that don't identify are provided quite tailored wellbeing support as well, because you might find that the women could be more forthcoming to wellbeing teams in asking for help, whereas some men and fathers find it a little bit more difficult, we've found internally.
Super, thanks very much indeed, Laura-Louise. So the next question that I'm going to ask the panel is, do you expect to see increased demand from men to work more flexibly so they can be more involved in caring for children and vulnerable adults? If so, how will you meet that demand? Suzanne, would you like to pick this one up first, and then I'll go to Laura and then Laura-Louise?
Thank you, Jane. Yes, absolutely. We are expecting to see an increase in demand from men wanting to work more flexibly. And certainly through some of our network group meetings that we've been having, we're seeing an increase of men also participating in those networks. And they are talking about, you know, how they want to maybe do compressed hours when they return. And definitely it's driving men to take on more childcare responsibilities as well. So how will we meet that demand? I don't see it being any different to the demand from women, you know, to work flexibly. At the end of the day, we treat everyone the same. The issue that we often have with the data coming out of our staff survey is there's a lot more informal, flexible working practices go on than we're always aware of. So I think we have got training in place for line managers as well, as to how to deal with flexible working requests. So I think it's just making sure that we put some more tools out there for people to access in terms of requesting flexible working. And I think it also goes back to the thing that I said earlier around the lessons learned from the last sort of 6-7 months, that everyone is now set up with the technology. And I certainly see that driving us towards more women and men working flexibly in the future.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Laura, how about you?
Quite similar, really. We do have a lot of men working flexibly, but it is probably on a more informal basis. So, you know, more agile working. We probably have, you know, we'll have men who may start half an hour later because they walk their child to school and things like that. So we're quite open to any flexible working requests, and it's something that we are aware that we need to work on more, as we've done quite a lot of work with mothers, and I think we've done really well with that, and we do have this comprehensive Parenting Matters programme. The next stage, I think, is really to start focusing on the fathers as well, and to understand how we can work with men to understand what their needs are and try and support them. But we're quite open to it. And it is something that we do promote regularly. You know, we are a flexible employer, and obviously we won the award and we promoted that, you know, internally. So we're quite open to having those conversations, and we do expect that a lot of people will be asking for it, and I think it'll be a lot of people asking to work from home more as well, just to cut down on that commute. even just something as simple as that, which I think is something that we can definitely accommodate.
Thank you, Laura. Laura-Louise?
Yeah, not a huge amount to add. I think though, and it comes back to some of the points I made about how women can be more impacted and how you respond to that. But the language needs to change. I think we need to be very explicit that when we make these offers, if we are seeing a large amount of women taking up flexible working and not men, we need to question ourselves. And I think one of the reasons that will be is we might say it's available to all and it's open to all, but you need to go over and above and say, you know, we do encourage men to take this as well. Someone in my team, he has been working 3 days a week for the past 3 years now since he had his baby, so that his partner can also go to work on certain days and he can spend time. And it's never, in the 3 years I've been working with him, it's never been questioned by anybody why is he working 3 days a week. So I do feel that it's generally accepted in our organisation. It might vary from division to division. You know, we do have different cultures within humanitarian or media across the organisation, but I can certainly say that I don't see any challenge with that. But you do need to make the messaging much more clear, otherwise you will end up continued imbalance between the roles of men and women in the house and at work.
Thanks, Laura-Louise. I'm really struck by the comments about informal flexible working. And I think for us, although any kind of flexible working is a good thing, one of the challenges about it being informal is that it can then just be granted to individuals as opposed to be available and people be able to request and get that in the same way that their other colleagues are getting it. But that it is really interesting. So the last question that I'm going to be putting to the panelists is, what are the key changes to ways of working that you expect to see become embedded in your flexible working culture? And Laura, if you'd like to go first this time.
Yeah, so I think probably one of the key changes for us is going to be the amount of office working and the amount of home working. I'd say prior to this current crisis, if you'd worked a 5-day week, you'd probably do 4 days in the office and 1 day at home. I think since we've all gone to working full time at home, we've realised that it doesn't need to be that way. You can be just as effective working at home as you can be in the office. And there is a benefit to, you know, you don't have the commute. You've got some quiet space, but there's also a benefit to going in the office in terms of the interaction with people and not being so isolated, and actually seeing your team face to face is so important. So I think for us, it's going to be a real shift to a much more sort of 50-50 split. And we've already started working on that, and we've sent out surveys to people to ask, you know, what is it that you want? Do you want to go back full-time to working in the office? And everyone said no. we want a good balance, we want a good split. So we're actually working on that at the minute to see how we can make that work, and as we transition back to opening up the offices, making sure that we're saying to people, you know, you don't have to go back to how it was before. We're gonna change things, and we're looking at the layout of the office and, you know, agile working spaces and all the things like that to try and promote that, so that we have much more of a balance moving forward.
Super, thank you, Laura. Suzanne?
Thank you. Yes, and I like one of the questions in the chat is around presenteeism, and I think Imperial College in some areas would have been a bit guilty of this, but I think it's absolutely moved us away from presenteeism, and I think we're going to see a change in terms of working hours to suit individual needs going forward, and how we continue to embed that. And face-to-face is not going to be our default position. I think we'll now have team meetings or just general meetings where some people will be dialing into a Teams call and some people will be sitting round a table. So I think we'll see a mix of that going forward. And as Laura said, you know, our campus is in South Kensington in central London. It's a very, very busy part of London. And in our wellbeing surveys, staff have been telling us, whilst some want to return to the office for that interaction, a lot of our staff are saying, well, actually, you know, if we're going to be working this flexibly going forward, I would prefer to move further away from London. We're seeing a big shift to people wanting to move down to the coast or the countryside because they're not anticipating doing that commute 3 or 4 days a week in the future. We know it's not going to be the same as it was before. There is going to be a new normal. So I think that's a really sort of positive business driver for flexibility going forward.
Fascinating. And, you know, speaks to that huge increase in the number of houses being sold in smaller towns and particularly on the coast.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Laura-Louise?
Yeah, thank you. So Save the Children are going to continue working primarily from home until we expect around sort of June, July at least of next year. We are making offices available for those who really need to come in, and I think that that's been, you know, something that's come off the back of quite extensive consultation with staff for some time now. Although there are risks associated with working from the office, we're making I think around 80 out of our around 600 capacity office seats available. So particularly important for people who, you know, might be working alone and have been alone for 6 months, people who have children and need that a bit of a break and a bit of a space. But also I think it's important to consider that for some people the home environment isn't the most safe place that they can be. And as well as mental health issues, there are issues around domestic violence. So we've really looked as an organisation, how can we support staff but retain that safety? And that's the approach that we've gone down. We also see it as a really good opportunity for change. We're very sort of London-centric in terms of our office, with around 80% of our staff being based in our London headquarters. And we believe that, you know, this coincides with us having a long-running review of our diversity and inclusion approach, and actually has kind of really kick-started some talks around how remote working really can service the creation of a more diverse workforce. There are so many people who cannot access central London, who in the past might have been able to work remotely, but even then not been fully included in the sort of work life of Save the Children, who now are reporting, you know, that it's so much more inclusive. Everybody now is in the same boat, and it opens us up to a much broader group of people who we might have missed out on in the past. So I think it's taking something that initially was seen as a real challenge and actually turning it into an opportunity. So I think we'll have to wait and see what the results of that are, but it's quite an exciting time.
It's fascinating to see, isn't it? That, and the flexible working and talking specifically as part of flexible working is the home working piece, is it really doesn't suit everybody. You know, I'm thinking of people living in shared accommodation who are trying to do a day's work while perched on their bed, which they're going to sleep in and watch television from. You know, it's really not great for them. So really interesting to hear that some of the office space is going to be open. So thank you all so much. We have had some questions in the chat, and I'm going to try and pick up on a couple of them which haven't been answered yet. And there was one question for Laura-Louise. Has the increase in paternity, or rather parental leave, for fathers or non-birth partners, has that had an impact on your take up of shared parental leave? And are more people more likely to take the 10 weeks leave than the shared parental leave?
Yeah, so I don't, so it's just sort of ending its first year of having the policy now. And unfortunately, I couldn't get the figures from HR quite so quickly on the costs and the uptake. But from my understanding, working as, you know, with part of the Parents Network, is that I think anybody who was eligible to take that additional paid 10 weeks has taken it either in full or in parts. I don't know what the impact on shared parental leave has been. You can still take shared parental leave as well as that extra 10 weeks. It does, and I can't get into the technicalities of it because I'm not an expert on SPL, but it does reduce some of what you're eligible for in SPL, but it's just incomparable. You just get a block of time, you get paid for it, and your partner doesn't get impacted by that. So there's no reason for anybody to not take it unless they don't want to be at home with the baby, which I completely understand, but I can't imagine would ever be the case. So I don't believe it's had any impact, except perhaps reducing, people taking it. But I think the general feedback was that people didn't like SPL in the first place. So this is partly why we introduced it.
Okay, great. And also it was only 2 weeks. Thanks very much, Laura-Louise. Does anyone have any tips or ideas of how to implement flexible working for staff working on shift-based roles? For example, people working FOH, I don't actually know what that means, in a museum, which is the case for most of their colleagues. Front of house, I think, is what that means. Laura, have you got any ideas in terms of front of house, and Suzanne, perhaps?
We do have front of house, and a number of them work flexibly, so they might do a job share, which is potentially something to look at. So, one person works 2 days, the other person works 3 days. I think the best thing to do is to ask people what it is that's important to them, and to try and understand from them what type of flexibility they want, because flexibility means something different to everyone. And you can't really assume. Somebody might be a mother and you might assume that they might want to work less days, but actually they might be perfectly happy to work 5 days a week, full-time hours. So it's really important not to make these assumptions and to ask people what is important to you, and then you can sort of go from there to see if it's something that you can try and make work. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yes, much harder with shift workers. We have catering, security, reception staff, but similar to Laura, they tend to sort of work it within the teams, so that they can sort of help each other out, but in a more formal way with their line manager. So working out what works for each of them individually. It is definitely much harder for those staff that don't work in a sort of office environment and are the front of house. So yes, you have to be a bit more innovative with trying to work out how that would happen. Yeah.
Laura-Louise, anything to add?
It's not an area that I've got much understanding in at Save the Children, but one thing I would just say is to echo Laura's point about not making assumptions. And one of the assumptions I think has been, that I've seen made in my previous roles, is that the flexible working that reduces your pay, so dropping your hours or working different days, is something that can be taken by all. So for example, I'm sorry to beat the drum again, but with single parents, many of us, I can't afford to work 4 days a week. And so actually it can be almost a little insensitive to over champion the idea of working part-time as a sort of solution to parenting challenges. Because for some people, whether it's single parents or people on lower salaries, that just isn't an option. So I think be really creative, talk to your colleagues and staff and try and explore ways of being more flexible without reducing income. That would be my advice.
Thank you. And certainly one of the things that we would advocate is the idea of team self-rostering, where the team work out where the pinch points are of the day and work out how to ensure that there are people there to answer those calls. Certainly one of our employer members mentioned that their team had added flexible working in, and this was a team that were answering calls, and they had made it a point of, one of their key performance indicators as a team was that they would not miss a customer as a result of the flexible working that they were embedding within their self-rostering team, which I thought was really interesting and obviously worked well for both the employees and the business. So Laura Rosario, did you look at the impact of your smart working policy and management development program on your diversity and inclusion measures and targets?
Yeah, I would say we're probably more at the beginning of our journey on the overall diversity and inclusion. We did focus a lot on gender diversity for a number of years, mainly because our partner stats aren't great. So we've got quite a lot of male partners and not so many female partners. So we really wanted to understand why that was and how we can make that better. So everything we're doing around smart working and flexibility is sort of part of that bigger picture as well, and trying to work towards that. And we have seen that our gender diversity stats have really improved. So we've got a balanced, our directors is a balanced male female now. Our senior managers, we've got a very good balance, and majority of levels across the firm, we have a fairly even split of male and female. We've still got a bit of work to do on the partnership. In terms of our overall diversity statistics, we've got a programme that we're just about to launch actually, which will hopefully have a real impact on those statistics. But I do see that the flexible working can only help towards that, because like I said at the beginning, it is something that everybody for all different reasons has said that is important to them. But I think that needs to go alongside a lot of other measures as well to improve diversity and inclusion.
Thanks very much, Laura. So we have 3 minutes to go before the end of the webinar, and I want to keep to time. And I would encourage everybody to keep the conversation going, share how your organisation is marking National Work-Life Week using the hashtag #WorkLifeWeek. Please make sure to visit our website, workingfamilies.org.uk, to learn more about our membership packages, policy reviews, virtual consultancy and training. Biggest thanks to everybody on the panel. Thank you, Laura-Louise. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Suzanne. And just as we finish, the last question from one of our webinar people, from Clive: how did working families support you in developing your good practice? And that, I think, is the question that we're going to end on. Thanks very much, everybody, for attending. And we've got 3 minutes, so really quickly, Laura, Rosario, how did working families help you?
Working families, I came to a conference myself a couple of years ago, and I got a lot of ideas from that. And our smart working policy actually came from that, around a discussion around the language that's used and making sure people don't just think we're doing you a favour. It actually works for the employer and for the employee. So yeah, conferences that I've been to, relationship with Joe, our relationship manager. We do the benchmark to get ideas on how we can do things better. So it's been really, really useful. And I think the award this year just shows sort of what we've got out of the membership. And I'll just add very quickly, if anybody wants to ask any more questions, I'm on LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect.
Thank you, Laura. Suzanne?
Yes, very similar. Started coming to the conferences and then started to look at completing the benchmark. And once you actually do the benchmark and getting feedback on that, it's a really good measure of where you're at. So we knew we had lots of good practice already going on for flexible working parents and carers, but you kind of take it a bit for granted. And then going through the benchmarking process, you kind of think, oh, okay, we are doing lots of good stuff. And just that recognition, especially going from top 30 into top 10, that absolutely sells the business case as to why I'm asking for money. And I'm an advocate and passionate about what we do for our working families at Imperial.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. Laura-Louise?
Hi, so I think we're in the early stages of our relationship with working families, and that has mostly centered around conversations and support between working families and the parental network chairs, which was mostly occurring when I was furloughed. So actually I can't give any sort of detailed information into that sort of thing, so I apologize, but it's been a pleasure being here today, and I hope we get to work more together.
That's great. Thank you very much for coming on. I think it's a testimony to Save the Children that they suggested that we speak to you, so they clearly are engaged with us. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's been wonderful. I've absolutely loved it. It's been really interesting. And as ever, one of the big takeaways, of course, is let's not make any assumptions. Let's actually talk to the people that are part of our teams and ask them what they want and need. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. I've loved it. And I hope to see you all, and happy National Work Life Week. Goodbye. Thank you very much.